Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. This week, I speak with KB Boyce and Crystal Mason, who are the producers of the annual Queer Rebels Fest in San Francisco. Queer Rebels is a queer people of color arts company that connects generations and honors our queer legacies with visionary art for the future. Co-founder KB Boyce is a gender non-conforming trans-masculine performer whose adventures have brought them from teenage punk band appearances at CBGBs in New York to B-grade horror movies in LA and on to solo blues performance as the drag king of the blues in San Francisco. Managing director Crystal Mason is an artist and activist whose work spans from Berlin to San Francisco. Crystal co-founded and co-directed Luna C Women's Performance Space, and they are the former executive director of the Jon Sims Center for the Arts. Today, KB and Crystal share about the history of Queer Rebels, their vision for a whole and healed queer trans POC community, and the power of intergenerational collaboration in art. Queer Rebels Fest runs this week in San Francisco, Friday and Saturday, June 7th and 8th at the African-American Art and Culture Complex on Fulton Street. For tickets and info, visit queerrebels.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram. Hi, KB and Crystal. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Nick. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to have you both on the show to talk about the Queer Rebels Fest that you both produce here in San Francisco that's coming up just this week. And I wondered if we could start out by having you share, how did you first come to creating the Queer Rebel Fest?
Well, Queer Rebels was founded in 2008 with me and the co-founder, Celeste Chan, in San Francisco. I was performing as the drag king of the blues back in those days, and realizing that folks of color, artists of color, were having difficult times getting booked at shows that would actually pay the artists. And being a New Yorker, that was a bit eye-opening and frustrating. And we talked about it and thought, well, you know, if we create a space for queer and trans artists of color to put their foot forward, to put their art out there, if we can create a platform, perhaps that will help. If we're a unified front, we can get our art out there and get paid and just center queer and trans artists of color in a way that wasn't happening as far as we could see. And so, in 2008, we started out with something called Queer Rebels of the Harlem Renaissance, and brought in multiple types of performers and artists, dance, music, spoken word, and everyone was focused their new pieces of art around bits of the Harlem Renaissance, which is historic LGBT, historic time in a way in Harlem. So many of the writers and performers of those days were queer. You know, they may not have called it queer back then, but they were of LGBT, form. And so we focused on that, and thinking that we would do a one-time festival with the National Queer Arts Fest, which is headed up by the Queer Cultural Center in San Francisco. And that one-time event went so well that we wound up continuing to trying to do it again the following National Queer Arts Fest. And honestly, that was 11 years ago. We've been doing Queer Rebel type of performance things for the National Queer Arts Fest since then. And we kind of evolved Queer Rebels of the Harlem Renaissance to Queer Rebels Fest in order to open it up to go a little beyond just Black artists of color, queer Black artists, and to be able to open it up more to the community and bring in other ethnicities and other historic stories. And, we're really about creating new art for the future, and we want queer artists of color to be centered in that. And so there you have it. I mean, we've been doing it 11 years. We're really proud of it, and we don't see any reason to stop. We're just going to keep going stronger.
Great. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Crystal?
Yeah, I just want to say that for me, this is like a very like sort of circular community story because I had spent a lot of years doing arts administration and had pretty much gotten away from doing my own art. And KB and Celeste asked me to take part in, I think it was maybe the second or the third Queer Rebels. And,
right, that's right.
Right. And so, like, for me, that was really a great thing because it got me back into art making. And so I put like a video in the festival. And so when I had the chance to come and actually work for Queer Rebels, it seemed like a really like completing a circle for me, you know, and like something that felt like really sort of meant to be. And it's like just like this really big honor, really, to be able to like serve this organization because I feel like Queer Rebels did this wonderful thing for me as far as giving me a space to be creative again. And so, yeah, so I'm like really happy to be able to kind of pass that on to other artists.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if each of you could just share a little bit more about your own background in the arts and activism that has inspired and sort of carried forward through the Queer Rebels vision.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, let's see. As far as my background, I can go way back to my family, who my oldest sister was part of, and I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn. My oldest sister was part of the New Lafayette Theater. She was an actor of New Lafayette Theater and the Negro Ensemble Company way back in the day in Harlem in New York. And as a child, when she was supposed to be babysitting me, she would actually take me to her rehearsals and such. So I hung out in theaters and backstage and I was loving, I grew up loving the whole idea of production and performance. And so that seed was put in me way back then. And another seed put in me by my family was just the Black nationalism, being aware and being, you know, I come from a background of folks who changed their names back in the 70s, you know, to drop their colonial names and took on more African-ish names. And, you know, we wore dashikis and the whole head wraps and all of that stuff. So activism was in my family way back. And so I kind of grew up with that and that feeling that, you know, it was really important for us as people of color to be ourselves and to be strong in that and confident in being yourself, and carry that forward to all these years later and finding community here in the Bay Area of queer and trans artists who are super, super talented and super, super mindful activism and what needs to be done and how hard the struggle is and how the fight has to continue. I just feel blessed to be here in this moment and to have Queer Rebels as a vehicle to continue to live this life of art and activism. And yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, Crystal, what would you like to say about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for myself, I feel like sort of like making things and creating things has always been sort of part of my life from the time I was very young until now. But I think the main thread for me is that I have always loved a good story. And that's driven like a lot of my life and like kind of where it's gone. And also I've always sort of believed that people being able to tell their stories, it could be really liberating, you know? And so like when I first joined ACT UP San Francisco, which was like in the early 90s, I feel like that's where my sort of outward activism started, but also where I learned really the power of art and art making to also to change a narrative or to create a narrative, and the power of like sort of taking control of our own stories. And so like there came a point in my life where I wasn't necessarily involved actively with any group where I was working in social work with the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. And so there came a time when that job ended And I had the opportunity to create a performance space here in San Francisco called Lunacy Women's Performance Space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it created in me a bit of a crisis because I was kind of like wondering if who am I if I'm not an activist? But it also came to me after a while that like what we were doing was definitely activism because we were giving like people who seldom had a chance to take center stage that opportunity to take center stage. And one of our main tenets with Lunacy was that we wanted to provide a professional space for people, but also kind of like what KB said, we also wanted to make sure people got paid for their art and art making. And sometimes that was like $25, you know, and sometimes it was more. But we really thought that it was important that like people get paid money for making art. And I feel like for me, that's the same things that run through here at Queer Rebels is like our commitment to centering the art of like more marginalized Teapot people, some of the most marginalized people, you know, so, but also that people actually get paid for work. And that remains important to me. And also like through every place I've been, whether it was Lunacy, whether it was Jon Sims, or when for a while I lived in Berlin and I got to do a few projects there. And through all of those projects, another theme that's also run through my work and my activism is that everybody gets some. You know what I mean? Right. So if I have a resource, one of my first commitments is to try to make that resource available to Black people and other people of color and queer people. And that's one of the things that I find really great also about Queer Rebels is I didn't have to come in with the mindset, how do I make space for people of color here? So that's been like a real pleasure.
Founded by and for people of color.
Exactly.
So I really like a lot of the threads that you both are bringing in around your experiences and activism and art and bringing that not only into the present, but into the future. And something you said, KB, in one of your responses was about the vision for the future. And I know that that's also part of the mission statement for Queer Rebels is that it is a company that connects generations and honors the queer legacies with the visionary art for the future. So I'm wondering, what do you see as your vision for the future, not only for Queer Rebels, but just for queer POC in general?
Good question.
The thing I would say is like, you know, one of the things I feel like is important, and especially once, you know, when we look forward, is, you know, one of the important things about Queer Rebels is that we're also intergenerational. And the reason we're intergenerational is because we know that, you know, we have things to share with each other, young, old, or whatnot, and like practices for like moving on and like ideas about how we can heal ourselves and one another. And that's one of the reasons why we're intergenerational, because we also feel like, I think that our future as QTPOC people are bound up, not so much with what white people do, but how we like see ourselves and see each other, and how we can develop like sort of healing modalities for ourselves. But also the idea, I think for me, is that part of like sort of like Afrofuturism and like what we see as the future is that we don't want to have to just create art that is about our pain in order to make money. We also want to make art that is about like our joy and our healing and our vision for who we are and like how we move in the world. So, and I think, but also like, I think particularly for Queer Rebels, one of our goals for the future is also about like training future curators and producers. And to that end, this year, we will have our very first intergenerational curatorial residency.
Which we're super proud and excited about.
Exactly.
Super.
That's one of the ways we want to move into the future is like we're going to definitely keep on focusing on performance, but we also want to like focus on like training people who will also center QT-POC art and artists, and also like, you know, who will like help carry like our vision and also into the future, you know?
Well said, Crystal. Well said.
Can you say a little bit more about the intergenerational residency program? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so basically it's a 6-month residency, and we basically are going to have like, there's going to be 3 residents, and they're basically, I think the age range is from about like 60 years old or so until I think the youngest person is like in their early to late 20s. And then there's someone that's like about 40 years old. So I'm being a little vague about the names yet because we can't announce the whole everything yet because, you know, this is
it's
timing.
In the works.
Right.
But it's coming.
Right. But it is like truly intergenerational. And the idea is that these 3 people will like work together to create an evening of performance. But also we've added like some things about like actually using social media as far as sort of like documenting the process. So I feel like that's something also is about like looking towards the future and like using new technologies. And it also like gives like these 3 people from like these different generations, different sort of art forms to get together and learn from each other and to support one another. And with the support of queer rebels to, like I said, to create an evening of performance.
And if I could add, we definitely are about creating a space for the intergenerational mingling of artists. I feel that the queer community, especially, that there is an unfortunate divide that happens between the age groups, and Queer Rebels is about creating spaces where artists of all ages can get together. We can all learn from each other. Elder artists can learn from the youth. Youth can learn from the elders. We just need space where we can flourish together and be together in a way that we don't usually get. A lot of the times after Queer Rebels events and during Queer Rebels events, backstage, the energy backstage between all the artists is just an amazing thing to see. I've had artists time and time again compliment and talk about that feeling they get of just being in a room full of queer artists of color together of all ages. It's something they've never experienced before sometimes, you know, and it's how exciting that it was for them. And it makes me feel so good to do that. And it's important. It's so important that we carry that on and create these spaces. And that's really a big part of our mission as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about this way of this program that you're offering of bringing intergenerational artists together, because there are definitely ways that both all the different generations can learn from each other for both the past and the future. Exactly. And I also love that you're weaving in these visions of the future into the work that you're bringing, especially in performance art. Live performance art, like with the festival, because I believe that art is the best way that we can start to create what we want the future to be, because it helps inspire people to imagine what is possible, and bring those images or experiences or songs or words or dances forward can really help people feel motivated and inspired to create that future that we want to see, that is liberating and inclusive for everyone.
Exactly. Until folks can actually see it, and it's hard to imagine it. But once you can see it and once you imagine it, you can manifest. And so, yes, it feels like a very important thing. And we want to continue to do this for as long as we can, and to pass it on to the next generation of curator producers, you know. And so, yes, that's where we're at. That's what we're about.
Yeah, and I think it's especially important around the Afrofuturism movement. And I will admit that I had never even heard of it until I did another interview with another queer POC artist whose interview is coming up in a few weeks. And they talked about it. And I think that's especially important now, especially with what's happening in the United States sociopolitically around people of color and particularly trans people of color, and helping them get their rights and be liberated and be understood.
Absolutely. It's imperative that we move forward in this moment. We're in such a crazy time in history. It's such a crazy time to be alive, but it is also a time where we can just move forward. We can, there's really no limitations. We need to just have that confidence in ourselves as artists to move forward and to create our future. If we can help in any way with that, that's where we're at. That's what I want anyway. Yeah.
So what can the audience expect from the festival this year?
Oh my goodness. Well, all types of things. We have many different types of performances you will see. You will see spoken word, you will see dance, you will see multimedia performance that is a movement along with visuals. Yeah, we'll have a photo booth in the lobby. Crystal, would you jump in anytime?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think also we have really good, and every year we have really great performers, and we try to have diversity of performers. We'll have comedy, music. We have this year, I think we're really happy to welcome Le Femme Bear, who is a up and coming superstar. And we're so happy to have them on our stage this year performing, for instance.
And let me just say, hashtag La Femme Bear. Go check it out on social media, hashtag La Femme Bear.
Right. And I think, we have we're having, just a very a cornucopia basically of performances and types of performances. And and all speaking to the theme of this year about how do we envision a future where QT-POC people, where we're able to center our healing and community and trying to be well in the world. And so that's sort of the theme of the show this year. And we're going to be basically coming at that from the diverse angles and genres.
And usually what I've heard from audience members who've seen Queer Rebel events, and I'm anticipating this again this year, is that we take the audience on kind of an emotional roller coaster. You'll find that you'll laugh at things, you will cry, you will be moved, and these artists really bring their A game. Our community of artists is super talented, and the performers who come through for Queer Rebels always come with fire. It's really, and I'm not just saying that because I am, part of Queer Rebels. I'm just saying that this is what we've heard. This is why we're still here after 11 years. What the artists that come through are really something to behold. And I really encourage folks to come through and support these artists. They put their heart, soul, blood, sweat, and tears into their pieces every year, and it's always amazing.
So one of the things I do is I ask all my guests the same question towards the end of the interview, and I'm going to do that now for each of you. And the question is, can you share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish?
Wow, that's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. I've been inspired by so many, but Crystal, would you like to jump in there?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think about that a little bit because I feel like there's been so much. But I would say the main practice really that has supported me is collaboration, I would say, with other peers. And, as far as being an activist to running art spaces to being a performer, that has inspired me. And it's the thing that actually gives me hope, especially in these days where sometimes it's really, really hard to feel hopeful. I would say, collaboration and working with people who I can, who share their visions with me and who I can share my vision with.
Yeah, as far as folks who have supported my growth, I definitely would like to give a shout out to Pam Peniston from the Queer Cultural Center, who was one of the first folks to jump in and support Queer Rebels way back in the day, 2008, for believing in us and for offering us a Creating Queer Community grant. That was a very small grant, but it was the first grant that Queer Rebels got, and it enabled us to do that first Queer Rebels of the Harlem Renaissance event. And that gave us the confidence and faith and belief in ourselves to continue with this mission. And then there are so many artists who have inspired me and made me want to continue, and just it's far too many to name, so I really don't know. But the community, the artist community here in the Bay Area has been just the thing that's kept me going. There's just, like I keep saying, so many incredibly talented people here doing the thing. And, you know, that's just incredible. I feel like it's an incredible place to be, an incredible time to be here. Yeah, I don't know if I covered your whole question.
And I would just add also, like, there's so many incredible, like, performers, and specifically, you know, QT pop performers who deserve to be seen and who deserve an audience. And, you know, that's, like, been a driving force, I think, in my life.
Hear, hear.
Great.
I agree.
So the Queer Rebel Fest is coming up this week in San Francisco on June 7th and 8th. Can you share with our listeners how they can find out more information and get tickets?
Yes, absolutely. You can visit us at queerrebels.com. You can go visit us on Facebook, please. We're also on Instagram as Queer Rebels Bay Area on Instagram, Queer Rebels on Facebook. The tickets are being sold by Eventbrite for Queer Rebels Fest. We have ASL interpretation on Friday night. Please spread the word, ASL on Friday night. We are offering solidarity tickets. You can buy tickets for folks who can't afford it, and those are available at Eventbrite.
And we also want to add that the show is going to be at the African-American Arts and Culture Complex, which
huge
is
shout out to them.
Wheelchair accessible, and a huge parking lot for people who might want to drive over. So, yeah, I think that's important to know.
And the doors are at, I believe, 7, and the show will begin at 7:30. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
Great, very good.
Okay.
African-American Art and Culture Complex, that's on Fulton and Webster in San Francisco this next weekend, Friday and Saturday. ASL on Friday. Yeah.
Well, I will have all those links in the show notes so people can find them there.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick.
Before I let you go, Crystal, I know that you have another project that's coming up that is similar. Do you want to share about that as well?
Yes, I'm very happy to share about that. The name of the show is Tomorrow We Inherit the Earth, The Queer Intifada. And it's going to run from Thursday, June the 20th through Saturday, June the 22nd at Counterpulse. Is an ensemble piece directed and conceived by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto with a great cast. And and I hope people can come out and see it. It's going to be a great piece. Again, like multimedia, costumes, zombies, you know, war, everything you want. So,
don't miss it. Don't miss it.
Zombies, music, and more. Who could turn that down?
Right.
Very good.
Well, KB and Crystal, thank you for being here and sharing all about Queer Rebels. And
thank you, Nick, for having us. We appreciate it. Thank you. We appreciate that so much. Yes. And we're excited to see you at the show as well, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, we hope that people will come through because they will not be disappointed. It'll be a great way to spend your Friday or Saturday night. And thanks again, Nick, for having us.
Do you feel lost or stuck? Or are you alone on your healing journey? If you're seeking guidance or support, I'm here to help. I offer online coaching and counseling for queer spiritual folks from all over. Schedule your free consultation with me now by going to queerhealingjourneys.com. I look forward to supporting you on your path. To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.